Oh man, you are in for a treat. This is a bonus episode. We interview Noah Hutton from the film Lapsis. Noah was the director, and this film is kind of about the gig economy, which fits perfect in our podcast. Here's some of the press notes real quick. An original sci-fi world and timely political themes, the film imagines a gig economy organized around a boom in quantum computing, where predatory corporate forces threaten everyday workers tasked with the work needed to lay this new quantum infrastructure in rural areas. The work takes the form of laying cable through huge swaths of forest, connecting massive cubic transistors. The film portrays human laborers who are forced to work without basic protections and are often robbed of their routes by automated cabling robots. These themes are central to some of our political discourse surrounding the 2020 presidential campaign raised by Andrew Yang and others about the threat of automation and the issues faced by the gig economy laborers around the world. They are also a part of a growing awareness of the exploitation of workers subcontracted by tech giants like Amazon, kept on timers and forced to sacrifice basic physical comforts in order to compete for their paychecks. And there's a bunch more things that they've written, and I've included those in the notes, but we had an incredible time talking to Noah. It was really cool to watch the movie, and if you're a gig worker, you're gonna feel some stuff. Like, you are gonna have emotion watching this movie, what this character is going through. It was so well done, and like I said, we had a fantastic time with Noah and watching the movie. So listen to the interview. The movie will be out February 12th on all video on demand platforms, and anywhere locally. You just have to check your theater if they're playing it. Obviously, with a lot of the theaters being closed, some of them are doing it digitally where you can kind of rent it. But you can go to Amazon, iTunes, anywhere you get your video download. And I encourage you to do it, because if you are a gig worker, you will definitely enjoy this movie. Thanks again, guys, for listening. Enjoy the interview.
But it's fun, though. It's fun. Yeah. But I mean, again, being honest with you, though, Noah, and transparent, this is the first movie we've been asked to do an interview with. But it's exciting, right? Because it's just the whole connection to the gig economy obviously makes sense, and both me and Jason was very pleasantly surprised about the movie. Gotta say, you guys did a great job.
Oh man, thank you, appreciate that. It was a scrappy production. We did our best.
Yeah, I watched the trailer and I'm like, okay, and I think it helped that we're all gig workers, so I could relate to a lot of that. So why don't you just tell us how you came up with the idea about this?
Yeah, well, the idea came from a personal experience. I'm someone who hasn't ever worked specifically in the gig economy, but I've been an independent contractor for about a decade now. So I've ever since I graduated from college, I made my living by starting my own, LLC and serving my services as a video editor and a videographer at large for nonprofits, small companies, then I got into more commercial work living in New York. And so in doing that work and kind of making my way for a decade in that capacity, I started to feel some of the stresses of the independent contracting life. And I think that served as kind of the foundation for the subject matter. But the world of the film of Lapsis definitely has more fantastical elements in it that came in more from just the sci-fi genre, seeing the quantum computing coming around the corner and imagining a world where all this new infrastructure work might need to be done to service quantum computing. And then a lot of little elements you see in our world today that are percolating, like automated delivery robots that companies are trying to literally roll out in different cities. And
right.
And then, I guess the last element to mention, which is a little more of a far-fetched connection, but I have a background in being really interested in brain science and neuroscience. I studied it as an undergraduate in college, and I never really got into being a scientist, but it was kind of just brain stuff was always really interesting to me. And something about creating the world for this film felt kind of like imagining the world of a brain and making all these connections all the time. Okay. And the idea of cabling in Lapsis, where these workers are constantly asked to forge new connections in this world, but each individual worker, if you think of like each individual cell in the brain, doesn't know what connections they're making. They're just sort of a cog in the overall machine. I guess that was another kind of like conceptual layer.
That's pretty cool. I must say and I promised Jason not to get too deep into it, so I won't. But the whole idea of the gig, it interests me a lot. And for me, I'm a person that I need to understand it and it needs to make sense to me. And it doesn't quite yet, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there. But I also understand that that's not really the important part of the movie. Obviously it is, but talk a little bit more about the interactions. You mentioned yourself, you brought up the whole, the robots and the cablers, the people working, bringing the cables around, right? Talk a little bit about like just the aspect of that from when you first see Ray, I guess out in the forest. And I don't want to talk too much, of course, about the movie itself, but just this whole thing. How did you come up with that whole aspect of the community and those kind of things? Does it make sense, that question?
Yeah, just sort of like what you're asking a little bit more about the mechanics of cabling and the world and how I kind of thought of this gig.
I think I was, but I'm not sure we need to go that deep.
I told you.
Let me just mention a few things about that. One of the things I was inspired by for this, thinking about this gig, is high-speed trading. Well, the way that high-frequency trading on Wall Street works, a lot of it has to do with geographic proximity. And a terminal, in Lower Manhattan, exchanging information with a terminal in Trenton, New Jersey versus a terminal across the ocean, there's going to be a different frequency there. And I'm sure many people are aware that that's going to affect the volume of trades being done and therefore even the price that traders are bidding at and so forth. So I was thinking of a world where that whole system has to run on quantum computing. And there's a bit of a leap here, because the thing about quantum computing is it does require new infrastructure. You do need new fiber optic cables to connect quantum computing terminals. I don't think that high frequency trading is going to be replaced by quantum computing, and we're going to need to literally do this out in the woods. So this is where the fantastical leap of science fiction comes in a little bit.
Sure.
But, if you'll just grant me, if you watch the movie and you buy this world, the premise of it enough to get out into the woods with this main character and to kind of buy that this story places him there. And the whole point of the story really is meant to make you feel like Ray is an everyman who, because he doesn't necessarily have to understand how all the science works.
No,
we don't. I hope, as an audience, and I hope people don't feel like they're missing something, because they aren't. It's okay. And so out in the forest, what these companies have essentially done is to enter automation into the woods, not necessarily as a force that's going to be completing routes and phasing out humans, but I would argue that in the film, the force of automation. We can talk about maybe how this relates to the world we're in today. The force of automation is more to encourage humans to work harder and faster. So in a way, it's meant to push the humans to sleep less and work harder, because these little robots don't seem to me like they could take over the job completely from the humans. They're still going to need a human workforce to get them across bodies of water and through brush, etc. And then you mentioned the idea of community out there, and I think that's something else I was interested in, is the way in which many of these aspects of independent contracting and gig economy life are billed also as sort of a lifestyle, and these apps have a community aspect to them, because one of the unfortunate results, I think, being an independent contractor is you can feel very atomized and cut off from the world. So you do see these companies trying to inject a community attention to their products.
Right. And I think you hit the nail on the head right there. We as a group, so we call ourselves an entertainment group, I guess. And we're not connected directly to any of the gig economies other than the fact that we do them, right? Uber and Lyft and Flex. I think we have a lot of Shipt shoppers. We have we touch everything. But what we've been trying to do for now, I think close to 3, maybe even 3.5 years, is we have tried to build a community not dependent on the gig, but the surrounding around the fact that we are all gig workers. Because exactly what you just said, Noah, was exactly true. I was finding myself when I was out driving, primarily weekends, it was just lonely. You were just kind of, you were yourself, and in between the rides, you weren't talking to anybody, you weren't doing anything, right? And so what we have now, we have a pretty active community where we are using apps in between rides to talk to each other when we when we out working, and it's much more, it's just as much getting out there to make money as it is getting out there to spend time with your buddies. And so that brings that other aspect. So that was very interesting how you brought that into to the movie, and you see several places. I think there's several key areas in the movie where that's really portraying that very well. And so I appreciated that. I thought that was really cool. Now, let me go back to touch on one thing that you mentioned, that you said you don't think the robots is going to take over like tomorrow or soon, and maybe not. But let me draw a parallel to obviously Uber and Lyft right away, because the big fear there from a lot of workers is that maybe not tomorrow, but very soon, self-driving cars is going to take over that job, right? It's not going to be the robot that's going to do it for us. It's going to be the self-driving vehicle, and we know it's going to come there at some point, but definitely it'll be and the fear there is it's going to be a system that's safer and better than, because we remove the human factor from the driving, right? Why wouldn't it be that for in this perspective?
I think it would eventually. I'm just saying, in the level of automation that's portrayed in the film,
okay,
is almost like, it almost feels like these are robots from the 90s. There's a retro sci-fi element to the world of Lapsis.
Sure.
And that's on purpose. It's just because I also feel like, in relation to your question, self-driving technology, it's self-driving cars, the promise has been there for over a decade now. We've been hearing nonstop about it. And company after company has gotten close, and then they've had a big test or something, we've been like, it's right around the corner. Every publication is trumping up some new rollout, and then some sort of awful tragedy happens, and someone gets hurt. There's an accident. These cars still can't, as far as I know, the AI can't perfectly tell between sand or snow what it's driving on kind of surfaces. So, I mean, yeah, sure. Eventually, the technology might get there. I don't think we're there now, and I would even bet not there in the next 5 years.
No.
It just is moving pretty slowly. So the world of Lapsis is meant to more closely resemble what I've felt living in the last 10 years of a world with AI promises right around the corner. But the technology is actually still much, it's much inferior to the intelligence of the human worker.
Oh, yeah,
sure. I don't want to create a sci-fi world where robots could clearly do it better than humans, but they're not. Because once they are, I agree with you, the market forces will just push humans right out of the picture.
Right. So
we need to be ready for that to happen. We need to think about what can those workers be doing if they're not doing that? Where will the jobs be?
So switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about you filming in the woods. I thought that was pretty cool. Obviously you have really nice cameras. Tell me some of the challenges of filming. It wasn't a set. You were straight up in the woods. And then one thing I thought, and this is just totally random, but Ray had trouble getting out of that tent every single time. It really caught my attention. I'm like, that poor guy. Every time he's trying to get out of that tent, he almost trips.
Yeah. I wrote this film for the actor Dean Imperial, who nobody will have heard of because he's not been in any films before. Okay. He's been in one short film a decade ago, but he's been a friend of mine in New York. He came to New York as someone who wanted to be an actor, but he got more into the playwright world and writing for theater. And I just met him through a common friend, and I could see that he had that quality still in him, that charisma, that he could hold a leading man. He could be a leading man of a film. So I thought when I was writing Lapsis, he'd be perfect for this role, the kind of everyman blue collar worker who comes in and sort of the world is just like passing him by. So he's a guy who doesn't camp, and I have camped a few times, but Dean has never camped, and so bringing him out into the forest, I would often like set up a scene and have him help him get inside a tent, and then just ask him to get out while we were rolling, and that would be many of those are just natural captures of Dean trying to figure out tents.
Okay.
How to like build a tent, which is in the film too.
Yeah,
interesting.
He really got totally frustrated with that, and so that was like, but almost documentary. Yeah.
So tell me, did you have any challenges filming in the woods at all? Like was it pretty easy?
It was tough because it's summer and there's it's hot. There's mosquitoes. It's low budget indie filmmaking, so people are doing more individually than on a bigger set where you have more PAs and stuff helping with every department. So everyone's taking on a little bit more work and pushing themselves. And we made sure a lot of indie films will go 6 days a week and take 1 day off to try to, because especially if you're bringing people out to a location,
yeah,
putting them up at a hotel or something. So we were putting people up at a local motel, shooting a lot of this in state park land and also some private property. We just because of the quality of work was so hard, we did do 2-day weekends, which I think was important for morale and physical recovery. So I think that helped. But shooting in the woods is in retrospect, it felt like we were at camp or something. Like it always like glows a little bit more in your mind.
Yeah.
In retrospect, but it was definitely had its challenges.
Interesting.
I thought I read somewhere that you guys did it in a was it surprising 29 days or something like that of shooting. It was like very low, right?
We did 26 days.
26 days. It was just amazing, yeah. And I gotta tell you, I did not think that it felt to me like a low budget movie. It did not.
Oh, good.
It was very, very well done. I was, as I said, it was just like any other movie that I've seen in the movies. So, and I thought that the casting was super strong.
Good. Well, that's all you can. Casting is to a certain extent the cheapest thing you can do because it's really just a decision you have to make of who to ask to do the part, right? But then if you're casting actors who will need to be paid a lot, then it stops being cheap very quickly. But we were working with a cast of some people who have been in some high profile projects, but certainly no household names, no stars per se. So there was a certain humility about the whole production. We were all in it together, which is you want to try to engender that, that ethos on set. And we definitely had that going for us.
But I think that works very well as well with the fact that it ties into the gig economy, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think it wouldn't have been the same if you had taken 3 or 4 very, very big names and throw them into the gig economy. I don't think that would have worked.
Yeah, I don't know if we'd believe it. I mean, I saw there was that film about Uber a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Which
Stuber?
Stuber, right?
I never watched it.
Stuber, yeah. I saw half of it. I couldn't watch the rest. I gotta tell you.
See, that's when if you're talking to an actual gig worker who couldn't watch Stuber, there's something went off the rails on that film.
It was just it was stupid. I'm sorry.
Well, one of the things you brought up emotion with me when I was watching it, because some of the frustrations that Ray was having, I'm like, I have those frustrations, like trying to get ahead, trying to do more, constantly hustling. And so I had frustrations, and I was like, I liked his attitude of like, I'm going to get this done. Although with him, and I don't remember the female lead's name, but I kind of wanted like a relationship to happen. I was kind of like, okay, where are they going to like get together? I don't know why, but that's how you know it's pretty good, because I was like creating my own stories as I was watching it.
I think without saying more, I think that's a little open ended.
Well,
I like that kind of delicious tension where people are, they're on the cusp of friendship or something more, and you feel something in the air. There's a scene where they're in the tent together.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's kind of like, well, I guess I'll go back to my tent. And and I think that's like, to me, that's like people kind of ships passing in the night when you meet like another freelancer or something, and you share notes for a while at like a bar or something, and then it's like, well, I guess we're just talking about work. Okay, we're going home. It's like,
yeah.
And a lot of that lifestyle, I think, is sort of like ships in the night.
I actually think you chose completely right there, because it would have been so easy to take it to the next step, and you decided not to. And so I thought that was great.
Cool.
That was really cool.
No spoiler alert. They don't get together.
Right.
I was worried I was going to give something away, but I mean, it really has nothing to do with the movie. But
right. I don't want to say too much. So we are in a medium-sized market here in West Michigan, and probably shielded a little bit from gig economy in like very, very large cities. So I think there's a lot of things that we don't necessarily see, but I also know and have read a lot about a lot of the things that people do on the different platforms. And I'm of course talking about the whole not safety, but the whole like aspect of misusing the platform, the cable, and you're talking about that, of course, as well. The whole concept as to how Ray gets the medallion, which obviously is not completely kosher, and that kind of stuff. What do you think, in your personal opinion? And, this is all difficult, and of course, it's hard to say how do we make things more safe. But what could you have done? What could Cabler have done to prevent some of those things? And what could we do in the future in all things gig economy to make sure that these different platforms don't get misused? Do you think?
Yeah, that's a interesting question, because I think what I was thinking of more so than the way in which any particular platform has users sign up and create IDs and everything. I was actually thinking more of the New York City taxi driving medallion system.
Oh,
which if you're familiar, is like the process of getting a medallion to be a New York City cab driver is arduous, very expensive, and like the medallion itself becomes like a prized commodity that gets handed down through generations to relatives when someone retires, because it's that valuable. There's a limited amount of them, so I was thinking of what if a gig economy company had adopted more of a medallion type system, because this labor is so sought after. They had to somehow winnow it down. Now, I don't think that that's the way in which Uber or any other platform right now works. If you go through the qualifications, you can become a driver. Now, you might be in a rural area where you don't, there's not a lot of rides available.
Right.
So that might be the challenge you're up against. But platform security right now in the gig economy, I'm not aware of people like misusing. I know, like, but what I was thinking about is there are services like Grubhub I've read about where if you don't take a certain if you don't accept a certain amount of low dollar orders, like if you're not taking enough $3 orders, you're not going to get to that next tier of orders. You're not going to see those $12 orders or whatever. And and maybe you guys are familiar with that.
Yeah, I've definitely heard about that. I don't know if I've experienced it myself, but I think it's more of a rumor kind of thing. But
okay, well, I've never worked for Grubhub, so I'm just reading.
Yeah,
this is speculative journalism, but for me, my as a filmmaker, then my mind runs with that. So
yeah.
But I was thinking of like that. That's a kind of way that these platforms could be misused. If someone transferred their ID, their account, to someone else, and they've put in that time to get to those high dollar orders, and they give it to a newbie, and then all of a sudden it has top tier orders, but they haven't put in any time. That's similar to the world of Lapsis.
Correct. And that's definitely a way that I mean, it's not confirmed as to whether or not any of the platforms in today's world is utilizing that kind of methodology. But I mean, I'm sure it's probably going on. That it would be difficult to think that it wasn't. So I think that's a very interesting aspect there. I was more thinking about the whole. I mean, so yes, the medallion being handed over, I get that. That's all stuff. But all of a sudden, he Ray is realizing that this medallion isn't reset. And there's a lot of things on this medallion that is not, it's not like it's like he feels like it's not like he's supposed to. And some of his own internal warnings are going off, right? He doesn't feel good about it. And he's obviously out there and everybody else is looking at him funny and that kind of stuff. And it's just, he notices that things isn't right. Right. And so I think that brings up an interesting security aspect, safety aspect as well, about the whole gig economy, because of course, two things has to be there, right? Which I think your movie touches perfectly on both of them. But the whole safety about the worker, but also safety about the product. And so that, I think that's interesting. But again, I just wanted to touch on those, and I thought it was pretty cool how you had both of those included in the movie as well.
Yeah, I guess one other aspect of that is, and I'd be curious your take on this is I was just talking about the tiers of orders or rides in terms of the amount you're being paid for them. But what about the rating systems for the worker themselves? I mean, part of the labor you put in, the time you put in as a gig worker, right, is to get higher ratings.
Yep.
And if that identity is transferred, that's a bit of an abuse because that's not exactly honest to the new worker who's absorbed your identity. So, I mean, have you ever heard of people doing that, of sort of like handing off their rating system to someone else?
Well, there have been talk about people using other people's phones, right? And so, and the whole thing, both Uber and Lyft and a lot of the other ones, they all work with this whole background check. And so a constant thing is if people are misusing other people's accounts to get around the background check, to be that, and how important it is that for the rider to make sure that the driver is in fact who the driver is supposed to be before they get into the car. So that whole aspect there, being the safety about both the driver and also obviously in this case, the rider. So that, yes, but yeah, you're right. The whole rating system ties into that very, very closely as well.
Right.
So absolutely.
One of the things that towards the end they were kind of unionizing, and did you just pull that from general unions or kind of all the talk about AB5 in California and, how they're kind of shifting the model of, providing health care and those kind of things? Is that where you pulled that from, or you're just in general, people get pissed? I mean, there's I think it's in maybe Atlanta or somewhere, but Amazon employees are starting to put a union together because of the mistreatment at the facility. So I'm just wondering where you pulled that idea from and how you placed it.
I think that's in Alabama right now.
Oh, Alabama. Okay.
But I've been reading both about, a lot of organizing going on and being thwarted for Amazon workers, which we'll see what happens with this one.
Yeah.
But certainly you mentioned California. I've been following California closely because it's not only where so many of these apps originated, but where a lot of the vanguard of these struggles continues to take place. Obviously, Prop 22.
Yep.
I actually watched you guys talking about Prop 22 a bit.
Oh.
I watched your episode on that. It was an interesting discussion. I appreciated it.
Oh, thank you.
It was absolutely 85. You mentioned. I've just been interested to see how unionizing would fit in with the gig economy, because it's been difficult. In New York, we have something called the Freelancers Union, and it's not exactly a union. It's sort of like union in name only, and it's a way basically to just have a healthcare market where people can poke around on Obamacare through another web portal. It's like many of these things are just sort of shells of an idea of what a union should be. I definitely pulled that from a bunch of different places, but there's just the struggle kind of continues. I'd be curious your guys' take on that, especially, you're not necessarily in a urban setting. A lot of these struggles are going on more in cities and stuff. So, I just saw the other day that Instacart has just slashed 1,900 jobs and all of their union jobs are part of the slash. And so I think what also happens is companies allow some unionizing to take place, and then they'll just cut that sector of the labor force off and open it back up to non-unionized folks. So
right.
It's tough out there. Companies don't want it, So I don't know if it will require more top-down regulation, or I'm curious your thoughts on that, though.
My personal thought is, I think if there is more top-down regulation, I think the gig economy is going to be destroyed.
Okay.
Because to me, but I also understand this is very difficult and it's very different, right? I think there's a lot of people out there that get into the gig economy thinking that that's going to be the new 9 to 5. And I just don't think that's what gig economy is about. I mean, we talk a lot about having a lot of baskets. That's kind of how we refer to it. You want to make sure that you don't want to put all your breads in one basket, whatever, and don't depend on just one platform. If you're a gig worker and you want to do that, that's great. But then make sure you have a lot of different ways of making that money that you need to do every week or every month or whatever it is. And for us, I think me and Jason are very close on this. We were people who really didn't want the whole AB5, and we were for the proposal 22 so that we can continue being contract workers and we can continue having the freedom that gives us. But we also maybe a little bit shielded here in a smaller market where we don't have to do those things. You, on the other side, let me turn you around and ask your opinion about that. Coming and having stayed longer in a bigger city, what do you think? I mean, last time I was in Chicago, I looked around and all I saw was Uber and Lyft vehicles everywhere, right? That's the only thing you see, cars around. There's so many of them. So I understand that there's a lot of people doing that, and I think it's a different thing in the bigger cities than in the smaller cities.
Right. I hear you on some kind of draconian top-down regulation could shatter, the way in which the gig economy plugs in the gaps right now that are out there in the market, and offer services that people actually genuinely want. But I something about Prop 22 that I was interested in is that it seems like it's actually restricting people to be using one app at a time. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but one of the restrictions is that you can't double dip and have as many baskets as your analogy about having not all the same basket. So all of a sudden you have to stick with one app. You're stuck with the jobs that come your way, the rides that come your way, and you're not paid for that idle time. So you're paid for like your engaged time, they call it, right? So
right.
Is it really accommodating that, or is it squeezing people so they have to work like 50-hour work weeks now to get to minimum wage, and that work week is made only of their engaged time? So unlike like a Starbucks employee who's paid for that full 8-hour day, the day they're behind the counter, this worker is only paid for when they're actually giving a ride. So I'm worried about something like Prop 22 for those reasons. I understand the reason to support it because it feels like it's the only way forward for providing this kind of work, and that you'll get squeezed out in the market if those measures are not put into place. But my solution would be more along the lines of making these companies more worker owned. And I think part of the problem is that there's such a huge disparity in executive pay to worker pay in so many sectors of the American corporate structure, but especially gig economy, that if you had models where you had more worker ownership of companies, I think you would see an evening out of affording more of a safety net to workers, not having them have to get to some kind of 25-hour minimum or something per week to get those benefits, but an immediate safety net upon working for that company. So I just think there's so many things that would be different if these companies were owned more by workers. And the fact that they're not, and you have CEOs running away with so much money,
right?
It's that those were where some of the abuses come in for me.
And totally true. And you mentioning that is obviously also the constant talk and the constant struggle about all the rates continually going down where you are. And so absolutely, there's definitely that's a different side of it as well.
Well, yeah, just as we're wrapping up here, my whole point with that is like the money's got to come from somewhere. If you want healthcare, these workers act like, it's just going to be the best thing in the world if they have all this stuff. But where's the money going to come from? Like, and you're going to get limited hours. So I feel like let me use whatever app I want, and I'll go out and do my own hustle, and I'll worry about my other stuff in my own, benefits by myself. I don't need the company to provide them. That's just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, but I'm saying, Jason, you should be paid more for that time, because then you wouldn't have to hustle so much to get some basic provisions like health.
And we've talked about that. Would I like to get paid more? That is the one thing that I think should happen. I think customers would be willing to pay a little bit more for the service if the drivers got that money, not if it just goes in the pocket.
That's right.
But that's the only thing I agree with. I would like to get paid a little bit more, but like all the other stuff, like the sick pay and whatever, I don't need any of that stuff. But
so maybe you can think about a situation where there's some top-down regulation for that, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Noah, I won't take up any more of your time. It's been a pleasure, honestly. I was really excited. I actually watched the movie this morning. I wanted it as fresh in my head as I could. So we definitely appreciate the opportunity. When is this going to be out, and how can people see it?
It's going to be out on February 12th on every major VOD platform, iTunes, Amazon. Also, it's available through local theaters virtually. So if you're inclined to look on the film's website, you can see all the theaters it's playing at virtually.
Okay.
So that you can support your local theater. A lot of independent, art house theaters around the country are playing it virtually. Again, in our COVID times, there's no in-person screenings, but it's a way to help your struggling local movie theater. So, but yeah, people can find it on their major VOD platforms where they stream stuff from. February 12th. And let me just say, thank you guys for having me on. It's been really fun to talk to you about this stuff, and it was a lot of the source material for the film. So it's great to engage with people who live and breathe it.
Well, thanks again, Noah. How can people find you online?
I'm on Twitter at Noah_Hutton, and Instagram also, and my website's noahhutton.com.
Okay. Any other projects in the that you're working on, or you're just like taking a break now?
No, I've already written my next script.
All right.
We'll have to get that going soon. And that takes a look at the world of advertising. It's somewhere I've done a lot of work, so I'm trying to explore that next. And then I've got a documentary coming out about neuroscience.
Oh, nice.
That I've been working on for 10 years. I've been shooting a little bit for every year for 10 years, and it's coming out. It's finally done, and that'll be out sometime this year. So that's on my website. You can check that out too.
Sweet.
It's called
Very cool.
In Silico.
You'll be able to find both the links down below.
Yep. All right, Noah. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and you have a great evening.
All right, you too,
All
Jason.
right.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.